Hi, I'm Dylan, and I'm going to be discussing the history of housing and Section 8 vouchers. So the National Housing Act of 1934 was established by the Federal Housing Administration in order to make housing more affordable and to stabilize the economy after the Depression. The housing left out many Americans, though, which created a wealth gap between Caucasian and minority families. The wealth gap continues to affect families today because of lack of access to resources such as good schools, healthy food, and resources such as health centers for marriage counseling or family counseling and disability services. When the Housing Act was established, African Americans were not granted loans into suburban areas with new housing. Section 8 housing was established in 1974 by the HUD for families to receive vouchers to be able to purchase homes on a private rental market. It is a way to help low-income families affected by past policies to receive low-income housing. Okay, so one alternative I researched is mixed-income housing. Cities such as New York City have put in a lot of funds and effort into constructing diverse developments and fixing rundown buildings to create neighborhoods with a wide variety of affordable housing. Mixed housing is an alternative to impoverished neighborhoods and racial segregation because of limits Section 8 still has, such as landlords denying individuals from living in a certain area because they don't want Section 8 housing in their building. This works because the subsidy is tied to the home in mixed-income housing and not tied to the person, such as in Section 8. It also avoids building housing specifically for people living in poverty all in one area, denying them access to resources that are usually in areas with more revenue. Mixed-income housing also encourages neighborhoods to be built with some affordability instead of all the housing being unavailable to lower-income individuals. Mixed-income housing also affects surrounding impoverished communities because families become surrounded by communities of people who are working and involved in community and in schools, and there are more resources readily available to them. A single family may have children who are struggling in school, and being surrounded by communities of mixed-income housing instead of all impoverished communities, they have access to more opportunities available for their children, such as after-school programs, healthy food options, and community-based projects to help children that will affect their family in a positive way. Section 8 housing has helped families in ways in giving them lower-income housing, but it has still created separation where all impoverished people generally live in the same communities because vouchers can be denied in communities that have more resources. With mixed-income housing, families with all different amounts of lower-income individuals and impoverished families can all live in one area where they'll all be given access to more resources and be able to create a better future for their children.
Hello, my name is Lauren, and I will be talking about the intended and unintended consequences of the Section 8 voucher program. So the intended consequence of the program is to reduce homelessness and assist families in moving out of the low-income areas. And with the help of the voucher, it lets those families use more of their money toward other necessities of the household, so like heating, electricity, or for groceries, childcare. So the voucher program really helps that cost of housing to be set aside. And also is supposed to help low-income families find affordable housing. The unintended consequences is that it doesn't force landlords to accept the vouchers, so it doesn't give landlords incentives to accept the vouchers. So landlords can still discriminate on who they want to be living on their property. And also Section 8 housing is still in areas with not a lot of resources, so it's still in low-income areas, and it's not providing upward mobility as one of the ideologies of America. So Section 8 housing is still another form of redlining. So there's no racial integration. It's still keeping those low-income families in one area. So it's not letting them go to a more community that has more resources. So not helping them in that aspect. But for the elderly and people who are disabled, Section 8 housing does not accommodate their needs, so no ramps for wheelchairs. And again, those neighborhoods still don't have the resources for their needs, and their needs are a little bit more than the average person. So the alternative that I came up with is to extend the expiration date of the voucher. So the current expiration date is 60 days. So my alternative is to give it another 30 days, so 90 days in total. So that will help. It gives them more time to find affordable housing and livable housing as well. So some of these landlords they don't make the housing livable. It's not great housing. So, and again, if it's hard to find housing, so it takes like a full day of searching to find the perfect fit. Like, you can't force people to be like, okay, you have 60 days to find a house or you lose it, and that's really unfortunate. So I still think that there still should be an expiration date, but to have that extended to 90 days will help. That extra 30 days will definitely help. I mean, I still think that the dream is to, when you get a voucher, like, you don't let that go away and not take a voucher away from somebody. But I know with like the wait lists are very long, so I know there has to be a cap, like an expiration date. So I think the 90 days would really help that. And that is my segment. Thank you.
Hey y'all, my name is Katie, and I'm going to be talking about the overt and covert objectives of Section 8 housing. So the overt objective is really, it helps decrease the homeless level of the population. That's kind of the main part of that. And then the covert objectives is the government spends $71 billion on mortgage interest deduction and $29.9 billion on Section 8 subsidized rental program. So you see the disparity between where the money's going. It's going to people that can afford like a house, that can afford to pay off their house, and then there's low amounts of money that are going to people that are struggling to even put a roof over their head. And that's from our book. And then 53% of high-income American households receive some sort of federal funding, like mortgage interest deduction, but only 11% of low-income households receive any kind of federal housing assistance. So it's also emphasizing the same thing, and that's from another article that's just emphasizing the point that people that can have the money, that can afford an actual house, and be able to have like payments on it, are receiving more types of funding and benefits than people that can barely afford their own housing. And earlier this month, Los Angeles announced plans to notify 96% of the city's Section 8 applicants that they would not get one of the city's limited vouchers. The fact that they're notifying people so last minute, and the fact that that's 96% of the people that are in Section 8 housing, that's got to take a huge hit. And I'm curious to see where their poverty rates and where the homelessness rates, if they increase due to this new change. And the voucher program has such a long waiting list that people only have 60 days to use a voucher or they lose it. So there's not enough affordable housing for low-income citizens to afford. And as you can see it from Lauren's alternative of just having an expiration date longer than the 60 days, so putting it to 90 days. And kind of my alternative is just, instead of building new expensive housing, use the money to renovate the existing houses to make it more affordable and livable. So I work my internship for Family Studies 497 is with Lighthouse Church, and part of my job is to meet with community members and talk with them about kind of their budget, what kind of got them in circumstances where they're seeking financial assistance. And a lot of times it's these people live in housing that they can't afford, or it's Section 8 housing, but the circumstances or the living conditions are terrible, that they constantly have roaches, they have mice, and when they tell their landlord blacklists them, so they can't get housing anywhere else. So it's almost like if you say what's happening, you get in trouble and you don't even get a place to live. You get blacklisted, you can't even live anywhere, so then you're back on the street. So kind of having places that they could renovate to make it more livable, I think would change dramatically, because you'd have people that feel comfortable with where they're living, that it's not just a roof over their head, it's something that's sustainable, and the landlords can actually be proud of the place that they own, rather than being making these lists that people can't, making lists that people don't want to go to those places, or they're just receiving the money. And I think there's more to life than just receiving money. So I think that would really help with the problem with Section 8 housing. So that's all I got.